Okay, hi, history of the mammals. This is take two. The first one, I had to stop it because the phone fell off of my selfie stick because I touched the selfie stick. This is my first video with a selfie stick. It's going to save me energy because I just hold it on my chest, but it might be not quite as good quality because it might move some more, but we'll see. Anyway, um, I've got health problems right now, so I can't really do anything. I don't know what's wrong. Maybe I have the coronavirus. I don't know. So let's talk about the history of mammals in a way that you ain't going to see nowhere else, and I'll see if I can do the graphics. I should do graphics to show what I'm talking about. So, yeah, I'm doing the video now. I'm more motivated to do talking videos because I don't smoke weed anymore. So, it's just for the last few days. So, history of mammals. Now, this is just kind of off the top of my head. I haven't looked at anything recently, so just rough at guesstimates. But okay, history of mammals. The general idea about mammals is that mammals came about at the fall of the dinosaurs. Dinosaurs were hogging up all of the space, and so mammals couldn't do anything, couldn't grow, because if they got too big, the bigger ones would get squashed and eaten by the dinosaurs. So the only ones that could live were the mammals the size of mice and rats, up in the trees, hiding inside of trees, and that's the extent of it during the dinosaurs. When the dinosaurs suddenly died, everything big died, and so only the little things survived. The little scavenger guys who could dig in holes and protect themselves from overheat and all that kind of stuff. Including the types of dinosaurs that survived. Birds are dinosaurs, but in the time of dinosaurs, birds used to have teeth, but there were some birds that were like the ones we have now, and those are the ones that could survive, because the ones with beaks, because they can sift through rubble and pick out little seeds and stuff and survive that way. So that's why birds are so finicky and delicate, is because those were the ones who survived the dinosaur extinction. Now, same thing with the mammals. Then the mammals came and grew because there were no dinosaurs. So, where do mammals come from? Mammals are slowly evolved out of reptiles. So, originally there wasn't really a clear dividing line between a mammal and a reptile. That's why you would call them mammaliaforms. Early reptiles you would call reptiliaforms. And then once it gets more distinguished, then you can call it a mammal. It's kind of like distinguishing between species. Like millions of years ago, the lion and the tiger were the same, and then they were a little bit different, and then they're so different they can't breed anymore. And so it's a sliding scale. And that's kind of where we are now with mammals and reptiles. It's been so long that they've been separate that mammals are full mammals and reptiles are full reptiles. Okay, so that's a basic introduction to the difference between mammals and reptiles and where mammals came from. They evolved out of reptiles over millions of years. There were these animals that were before the dinosaurs called I can't remember, but there was a big extinction that killed them, and then that's what brought up the dinosaurs. And those things were more mammal than reptiles, the ones that were before the dinosaurs. So it's just a sliding scale. Anyway, history of the mammals. So, one interesting thing about mammals and the dinosaurs and everything is that when the dinosaurs got started, there was Pangea. That was, let's say 250 million years ago. Pangea was when all of the continents were one continent. Before, there was this thing called Gondwana, I think. It was Gondwana, and then it breaks up, and then it came back into Pangea, and then it broke up. And now I think we're currently still breaking apart. So the interesting thing about dinosaurs is that when dinosaurs got started, Pangea was just one big continent. There was only one continent, and then the rest of the earth was water. And so dinosaurs got their start, a lot of them in the middle of Pangea, where there was no water. It was totally dry because it was so big, the clouds couldn't make it into the middle of it, and so that's where like true like desert type reptiles got their start. And dinosaurs got their start at Pangea, and then dinosaurs existed for maybe 180 million years until 66 million years ago. And so the interesting thing about dinosaurs is when dinosaurs were born, there was Pangea, one continent. When dinosaurs went extinct, the Earth was in a very interesting situation in that all of the continents were island continents. It wasn't just Australia. You had Australia as an island continent, just now as it was then, pretty much shaped the same and everything. Although there wasn't a continent next to it called New Zealand. I don't know what the continent's called, but New Zealand used to be a continent, and then the water level rose and it covered up all the area around it. But and then South America was an island continent. It was completely separated from North America. North America was its own island continent, completely separated from everything else. And then you had Africa, which was completely separated from Eurasia. And then you had Asia, which was separate from Europe. Okay, so you have North America, South America, Australia, Europe, Asia, and Africa. You know, and Antarctica was also its own continent at that time. So they had 7 continents. When the dinosaurs got started, it was all one continent, and when they went extinct, everything was separate. Now, it's interesting to think that it's kind of magical that all of the continents were separate at the time, just happened to be completely separate at the time of the extinction of the dinosaurs / beginning of the mammals, because all of the mammals evolved from tiny little rat-sized creatures into what they are today, separate from each other, completely independent of each other. If it had have happened at any other time, you wouldn't have such a diversity of mammals. So it's kind of a miracle that we have so many different kinds of mammals, because they were separated at the time. And then only since 66 million years ago did North America and South America connect. North America and South America connected 20 million years ago or something. I can't remember, or even less. And then Africa and Eurasia connected just a few million years ago. And also at the time of the fall of dinosaurs, India was its own little island continent out in the Indian Ocean. So so it created this opportunity for all these little munchkin guys to grow up into what they are now. So in one way that you look at it, if you wanted to look at the origins of mammals, you could kind of look at all the mammals that are alive today. They actually existed at the time of the dinosaurs. They were just small. Okay, one best example that I have is the let's before I say that, let's just say the different kinds of mammals that there are taxonomically. Now, as far as taxonomy goes, the classification of animals, it is very very sloppy. People are still debating classification of species and animals. They're still discovering species. A species a day would go extinct regardless of the current man-made sixth extinction that we're having now. In best case scenarios, you'd still get 0.01% of the species go extinct. I think like a species, at least a species or two, go extinct every year, just from the natural ebb and flow of the Earth. And so that also would then in turn mean that a species or two would be created every year, because we're talking about a homeostasis situation. Species are always getting, extinct, and ones are always getting created. Um, but when um, but all the different so the way that we categorize things, classify things, it's very complicated, and it's not cut and dry. One reason for that is one example for that is like with the bone wars in the 1880s. You had these two guys, these two paleontologists fighting each other, trying to find more dinosaurs. So they were cheating, and they were they were over rushing, and so they were classifying the same dinosaur as different dinosaurs just based on the different body parts because they were in a rush, and they categorized all that stuff back then. And so then as we go back forward in time, it becomes more difficult to edit how we classify things, kind of like with spelling and grammar. English spelling is very convoluted with silent letters and double letters and funky spelling rules and stuff that don't have anything to do with this pronunciation. And it's extremely hard to just revamp the English language because there's no consensus, there's no emperor who can just decree. So it's kind of the same thing with how we categorize animals. And so, you have you have kingdom, the way that you categorize animals. You have life, kingdom, domain, phylum, genus, species. But in between, see, it's like the 7 main categorized, but in between all of those, a lot of those, you have all these like sub-categorizations. And one of the categorizations of the order of mammals is, and mammals are an order. So of the different orders that we have, you would have like mammal, reptile, dinosaur, or like bird, and then like crustacean, and an insect and stuff, and so within mammal you have an interesting category, which I think should maybe be more spoken of. People want to talk about it, and I asked these paleontologists on their YouTube about this, but they didn't answer me. I think they want you to pay them before you answer them. But one way that you categorize mammals is based on where they're from. So one type of mammal is the Afrothanasia. They're from Africa. And then you have the Loranthanasia. Those are from Asia. And then you have marsupials and monotremes from Australia. And then you have one marsupial and just a certain type of mammal in South America, and North America, I think, is the same. And then you would have one called Eurasia or something from Europe. And so you actually can divide taxonomically the different animals based on what continent they're from. And so the animals from Afrothanasia, the African mammals, there's this, you have the elephant shrew and the elephant. Okay, now if the elephant shrew is a rat with an elephant tusk, an elephant trunk, okay? They work like elephants. They pick stuff up and they put it in their mouth, okay? That's what elephants come from. Elephant shrews and elephants are related. So elephants in the time of the dinosaurs, so if somebody says, oh yeah, elephants didn't exist in the time of dinosaurs. Well, sort of they did. They were just miniature elephants, elephant shrews. You could say that monkeys didn't exist in the time of the dinosaurs, but monkeys existed out of something. They existed out of a little monkey thing. There were tiny little monkeys that existed in the time of the dinosaurs. So it's something that you could recognize in the present time existed in the time of the dinosaurs. Okay? So you could say that cats, dogs, everything existed in the time of dinosaurs. They were just smaller. So So, and that's why you have all these different kinds of mammals, such a wide range. You have these, elephants live a completely different life than like deer. Elephants grab things. They have this trunk that grabs things and puts in their mouth, and then trunk for digging. The deer operate completely differently. They just eat the grass right out of the ground, and then you have the predatory mammals. And so what happened was so how they evolved since the dinosaurs was the mammals. The mammals had about, the Earth was completely devastated when the comet came and crashed into the Caribbean 66 million years ago, which made it very difficult for animals to survive, and so only the little ones could survive. But then it took about 10 million years for the Earth to recover, the ecosystem to recover, for the plants to grow back enough to be able to support larger animals. And so once that happened, the animals got to be bigger, and that's when you started to see the differentiation between the mammals. So like they think like 40 million years, and then like 30 and 40 million years ago is when you can start to see the beginning of a bear. If you ask how long a bear has been around, about 40 million years. That's when, and see, bears are a type of animal called carnivoria. So they're like predatory mammals that eat other mammals, carnivores. And the different carnivoria started to diverge from each other 30 to 40 million years ago. So that's when dogs and bears started to diverge from each other, and cats and dogs diverged away from each other, and then as time goes on, they get even more and more divergent to what we have now, and they grow to all the different sizes, and so. But then 5 million years ago, 6 million years ago, monkeys started to turn kind of into humans. Like we started to walk upright, and we started to have like Australopithecus. And so we're actually Afrothanasia. We're from Africa. Monkeys, that's what we are. Monkeys turn into gorillas turn into chimpanzees turn into humans. So about 6 million years ago, humans come around, and but then 300 to 350,000 years ago is when Homo sapiens came around. So humans that look just like us have been around for 300,000 years, and that's a very interesting thing to think about, because animals are adapted to a certain environment. That's what animals are. They're adapted to an environment to live a certain life. Now, if human beings like us have been around for 300,000 years, that means our general lifestyle has in turn been around for that long. And you don't hear people talk about that much, but it's interesting to think about, because everything that has to do with humans existed 300,000 years ago. So that means we had pets 300,000 years ago. We had kingdoms 300,000 years ago. We had tools 300,000 years ago. We had everything that the caveman type of person would have 300,000 years ago. So that means that, and we were pretty much dominating, we had a very dominant position in the ecosystem 300,000 years ago. So that means that for 300,000 years, all the other mammals in the world have been getting genetically modified by humans. Meaning to say, if for the last 30,000 years there were these like giant mammals around, humans were able to wipe those animals out. Because humans have been around for that long, and we could organize and think the same way we do now, pretty much 300,000 years ago. So that means that If these animals, in one way to look at it, if these giant animals, and there were giant mammals that were alive up until 11,600 years ago, when there was a sudden extinction, and it's becoming more and more mainstream that the cause of the extinction was the comet that came, another comet that came and landed in South Carolina, and because you can still see all the little pot marks, they're lakes now from the pieces of comet hitting the ground. And then inside of those lakes, you can see little diamonds that are only created from asteroid impact. And so all the way up until just a blink of an eye, so for 290,000 years, humans lived alongside gigantic sloths, saber-toothed tigers, short-faced bears, like giant mammals, giant rhinoceroses, and animals that were very that could destroy us, And so that's one reason that they coexisted with us, because we weren't really organized enough to wipe them out. But we eventually did wipe them out. There's another theory of why those animals went extinct, and it's not necessarily, and so it's not dependent on the comet. There was another reason they went extinct. It does, like the comet didn't even have to hit, and they still would have been extinct, because humans made them go extinct. Because as time goes on, humans gradually got more and more organized, and we started to become better at killing animals. Like when you can actually trace the growth of human society and where humans are based on when animals go extinct. So, for example, there were these animals that lived in islands in the Mediterranean Sea, because the Mediterranean Sea used to be empty, and then it suddenly filled up. Just suddenly, the Straits of Gibraltar broke, and it just flowed in and filled it right up. And so there were these little islands inside of the Mediterranean Sea that suddenly appeared, and then they've been there forever. And so once you have islands, animals isolate on islands, they then morph. And so you get insular giganticism and insular dwarfism. And so there was insular dwarfism with these elephants, little 3-foot tall elephants. They used to be big elephants, but then they got small. Like they were tiny as elephant shrews in the dinosaurs. Dinosaurs die, they grow really big, but then they get isolated on this little island, so then they grow down to 3 feet tall again. And but then the elephants suddenly disappeared. They went extinct. And the obvious, to me, reason why they went extinct was because humans suddenly showed up on that island. Even if you can't see the island from the land, humans are eventually going to get there, whether it's some crazy-ass humans who are fleeing some other humans in a boat, or crazy humans who just want to see what's out there. They eventually make it to that island. Once they get to that island, those little elephants have about 100 years to live. Not long, because they're so easy to kill. Right? So the people get there, they go, oh my God, this is the land of milk and honey. They're these like slow-moving, big fat animals that we can easily kill and just feast on. And because humans weren't really that organized at that time, they just wipe out the animals, and then they're like, hey, where are those animals? Oh no, they're dead. They have to figure out another way to survive. And so humans, you don't even need to find human bones to find out when humans arrived somewhere. Just look at when the animals went extinct. And so that's why, in my opinion, why all the mammals, the big mammals, went extinct. All of them was because of us. We hunted them, like the sloth. But that's not the only reason they went extinct. I think for a long time humans had more respect for animals than we do now. We saw them, as far as intelligence wise, we saw them, and you can see this from Indian legends. They would talk about the bear man or whatever. The bear, he did this and this, that, like he's a human. They're along your lines with intelligence. So I think they were a little bit more tolerant of those animals. They were afraid of the animals, but they were also, I think they also understood that they understood ecology, and they understood that you don't want to make them go extinct because you rely on them. And humans have been like that for the last 300,000 years. People seem to think that environmentalism is a new concept. It's not. Back in the time of Livy, The very first king of, or Livy, one of those Romans were lamenting pollution. They went and they said, oh, these rivers used to be pristine, but then we humans go and mine the rivers and mine the earth and pollute the rivers. So they were very, very careful about mining and polluting rivers back in the time of the Romans. So even before the Romans, for the last 300,000 years, humans were very they were just like us. They had more respect for the earth. And there was a period of time where they were also a lot more peaceful. If you look at grave sites in the time before recorded history, like 5,000 years and back from there, the most elaborate graves were females. But since 4,000 years ago, all the elaborate graves were males. And that was because humans became very warlike, because we overpopulated to a point where we started bumping into each other and fighting for territory. So then we had to become more warlike. So then we became more patrilineal. But before that, we had the leaders were the women, or at least I think even for the grave sites, it appeared that the leaders were the women, because they're your mother, and they gave birth, and you didn't have to fight people because people weren't fighting for territory. And so back in those days, we probably weren't fighting over the animals and the resources, and so we were coexisting with the animals for a long time. So my point is, for the last 300,000 years, we have been culling and curating the mammals. And so when you go outside and you look at these bears and lions aren't necessarily completely wild. The bears and the lions of today are the ones that we allowed to stay because they were the ones who weren't so dangerous they'd just wipe us out. And so that's why bears and lions today, and all the mammals today and animals, are afraid of humans, because those are the ones who survived humans. All the other ones who weren't afraid of humans got wiped out by humans, because humans have always been better at controlling the environment than the animals. And let me just say one interesting thing. I remember I was watching Michio Kaku talk about physics, and he said something about, and when humans have been around for the last 100,000 years. I don't know where he got that, but he said 100,000 years. Plato from Greece, he says that humans have been around for 100,000 years. The same as Michio Kaku. Isn't that interesting? But anyway, Plato said that humans have been around for 100,000 years. He didn't say it that way. He said 10,000 times 10,000 years, which is 100,000 years. And he said that for the whole time, we didn't have arts. And then arts have only been around for 2,000 years. So according to Plato, arts got started, he said 2,000 or 3,000 years. So according to Plato, arts, meaning civilization, like the art part of civilization, disposable civilization, people who were rich enough to spend their time painting and singing and dancing, had only been around from 3,500 to 2,500 BC. And that's exactly what archaeology says. It says that the Indus Valley, Egypt, and the Mesopotamia all suddenly appeared 3,200 years ago. That's what Plato says. Plato knew the dates. But Plato also said that humans have been around for 100,000 years. So I think that's interesting. I don't know how they knew that or how he guessed it, but it's very similar to what we have. So for 100,000 years, humans have been more or less domesticating animals. People think that there's wild horses. Like you have the wild Mustang of like the Western United States of America. Well, the reason that the wild Mustangs are wild Mustangs is because, like, there were no horses in the North Americas when North Americans came. They originated here, and then they, like 30 million years ago, as these tiny dog-sized animals, and then they immigrated to Europe and even Africa as in the form of giraffe and zebra. but they originated in America. But when the Americans came, or the Europeans came, there were no horses. And so then they brought horses, and then some of the horses escaped, and they let some of the horses go, and then those horses turned in to the Mustang. So Mustang are escaped domestic horses, so that the real wild horses come from Europe. However, they discovered with mitochondrial DNA that even the wild horses in Europe aren't wild. Even the wild horses in Europe that we cultivated 4,500 BC, 6,500 years ago, something like that, in the northern Asia, those animals were already domesticated. They found out that there are no wild horses. You have wild horses running in Eurasia, but those are just escaped domestic horses, just like the American ones. So we have been domesticating horses for 300,000 years. It's just that it's like an ebb and a flow, like somebody would domesticate a bunch of horses, and then their kingdom would die, and the horses would escape. Somebody else would get those horses and domesticate them. So the period. So animals, mammals, and humans are a lot more genetically like coexistent than people think. They're not as isolated, and that's why animals aren't afraid of us. Like I went on a bike ride a couple weeks ago, and there was this fox. Foxes are wild animals. I stopped next to the fox 5 feet away from him and 10 feet away from him, and I was filming him, and he didn't even bother. He was just playing with a stick. He didn't even bother to walk away from me for a good 30 seconds. And then right in front of me, as I'm filming the fox, a bear cub, walks right in front of me, right in front of a car. And the car had to stop, and he jumped over to go to somebody's backyard. Like bears and mountain lions, they've been filmed here in Boulder walking around. They're not afraid of humans. They're afraid of humans, as in they won't try to kill a human most of the time, but they're not afraid of humans. Thinking that humans are going to hunt them down. They're more accustomed to humans. So, the animals, the more wild ones from 350,000 years ago would be a little bit different. They'd be attacking you all the time, looking at you just like another animal to eat. And so so let's talk about cats and dogs. Dogs have been domesticated for 300,000 years. And I know that just from like common sense, because humans love dogs. Humans like dogs. Dogs help. Dogs can live, like we live coexistently with them, because they can warn us about predatory animals coming with their barks and their smells, and then we can help them by giving them our bones that we don't even want to eat, and then they could eat the bones and clean up our campsite so that pests don't come in here and like mice and ants and stuff get all over ourselves eating our food. So we live coexistently with dogs from a lifestyle, and that means we did 300,000 years ago as well. That means dogs have been domesticated 300,000 years. So if you look at all these little dogs, like these little dogs that could never live in the wild, like the little Wiener Schnitzel dog and stuff, those dogs 300,000 years ago were a wild animal that could, dig holes and live in packs and run around. But now they have been so domesticated that they can't live on their own. They're basically appendages of humans. If you look at archaeological data, dogs were domesticated at the dawn of human civilization, like in China 2,000 years or 4,000 years ago and stuff like that. So basically, at the dawn, we had already domesticated animals. So there's nothing to say that we hadn't domesticated them before that. So, and also dogs can mutate and change pretty quickly. If you look at, you can look at YouTube videos of or pictures of bulldogs were a lot less stocky just 100 years ago, and then people started breeding them to be fighting dogs, and that's why they got stocky. So just because dogs they don't live as long, so they can mutate quicker. There's more generations, so you can see marked differences just in 100 years. 500 years ago is when they imported the Tibetan Mastiff, and that turned into the Saint Bernard. But the Saint Bernard of today looks different from the Tibetan Mastiff because it had 500 years to evolve from it. But what's 500 years and 300,000 years? That's nothing. So dogs are basically like dependent on humans for that long. Now, if we're going to talk about and of course we have all types of different wild dogs, but so back in those days when there was more nature, you could picture the regular dogs now that were kind of in a wild state. Okay, so anyways, let's talk about cats. So cats are an interesting animal because it's one animal that has a large size dimorphism between the species. And so why are there so many different shapes and sizes of cats? Why do they range from the 800-pound Siberian tiger all the way down to your 5-pound house cat? But yet they all look the same. And the reason is because of a genetic bottlenecking. If you have a genetic bottleneck, you can make everything very distinguished from everything else genetically, For example, 72,000 years ago, there was this lake, Toba, Indonesia, blew up, exploded. And it's this island. There's the island of Sumatra in Indonesia. And inside that island is a lake. And inside that lake is an island that's the same size as Singapore. And it's basically an island inside the lake. There is a corridor of about a half-mile wide on one side that connects to the mainland, but that probably didn't exist after the explosion. But after that explosion, only about 2,000 human beings lived on the entire planet. They made all the human beings go extinct. Like that explosion was so big that it wiped out everything in India, because all of the ash went and landed in India, and there's this ash layer in India from the Lake Toba explosion. And so so before 72,000 years ago, there were probably a lot of different kinds of human species. But then if you cut it down to 2,000, and then that 2,000 people grows up into 7 billion people of today, it makes it a lot. That explains how humans are completely separate from chimpanzees or any other. There's nothing between chimpanzee and human. There's no like quasi-human, because all the other ones died and just us survived. And so that's probably something similar to what happened to cats. There was some kind of a catastrophe. There was a huge dearth of the independent predator. And so the only kind of, everything died. And, you can explain it with fingers too. Like, why do we have 5 fingers and not 6? Well, one reason is because maybe there were six-fingered people, or not, it's like 6-fingered animals like running around. And then there were 5-fingered animals running around. But there was a catastrophe that just so happened to kill off all the 6-fingered animals. And so after that, everything has 5 fingers. So it doesn't have to be survival of the fittest like Darwin, where 5 fingers are better than 6 fingers. It could just be 5 fingers just so happened to survive. And then after that, that's just 5 fingers, because 6 isn't going to mutate out of 5. So same thing with cats. So there was probably some kind of a catastrophe that killed everything off except for this small population of independent predator, because that's what cats are. Dogs are group predators, and cats are independent predators. So that's why dogs, when they drink very sloppily. They just like they can get more water in their mouth in a short period of time than a cat, but they're very sloppy because they drink with their tongues forward, and they just grab it and splash it in their mouth because they're packs, and whoever gets to the water the quickest, maybe it's a small puddle, whoever gets there quickest and drinks it the fastest is the one who survives. The one who gets there last, where there's no more water and can't drink as fast before they run off away from something, dies. And so, but cats could always take their time because they're solitary, so they're very neat and delicate, kind of like birds. And so there was some catastrophe. There was one animal that's managed to survive because it was independent, probably not that big, the size smaller than a modern house cat probably. It was the ancestor of the cat. But that was the only thing that had survived. And so anything that comes out of that is going to look like that. And so then time goes by, they do very well because they live alone, and they don't overuse the resources, and they can travel around and pick whatever food they want independently. And then sometimes they can do very well, and so then they grow very large. And then they even become like dogs, like lions are like dogs. They live very socially like dogs. And then, hyenas are cats also. I thought they were dogs, but they're a type of cat. They're felines, feliniforms, but they live like dogs. So that's why you have all these different sizes of cats that look the same, because they sprung out from one thing because everything around it was killed. It takes a lot longer. I think it's like 10 times longer for animals to grow in size than it takes them to shrink. I don't know how long, I don't know the exact equation, but I can give you an example of how it doesn't take long for animals to shrink. The best example of mammals shrinking in size are going to be the California island mammoths. There are these islands called they're like a nature preserve. They're off the coast of Southern California, off the coast of Los Angeles. There's like 7 islands. I can't remember what they're called, but they had that insular dwarfism. They had these little 250-pound, like 4-foot tall elephants that lived there, that went extinct 10,000 years ago in the catastrophe. But they originally got there because like 70,000 years ago, 75,000 years ago, the ocean level rose, and it separated those islands from the mainland. So those mammoths were eventually called Columbian mammoths, which were giant mammoths that wandered over the Bering Strait from where they originated in Africa, and then slowly as little elephant shrews 60 million years ago, and then got really big, turned into giant elephants, and then came into the Americas, and then had since been extinct in the Americas like 10,000 years ago. But so it took from 75,000 years to, or maybe 72,000 years, I don't know, to, I guess maybe it was related to the Krakatoa explosion, but or the Lake Toba, from 72,000 years to 10,000 years. So it takes 62,000 years to shrink like 1,000% or something, to shrink from like what is it, 13,000 pounds or something, down to 215 pounds. So that's the quickest I've ever seen. But it takes longer for animals to get bigger. So now I haven't done this equation on my computer yet. I mean, on my little chart, but it takes, if it only takes 50 million years for there to be little itty bitty animals to grow up into all the different big mammals that we have today, then think about how many different times you could just sprout animals out of nothing in the blink of an eye in terms of Earth time, because the Earth has like like 3 more billion years or something before it's going to get gobbled up by the sun. So we could create a whole new order of animal, make them go extinct, whole new order of animal, make them go extinct like 100 times before the Earth expires. And so, and we have had lots of different animals completely evolve. Like the animals that lived before the dinosaurs, I think they lived longer than the dinosaurs. They're on for like 200 million years. And so there were all sorts of different forms of them. So, so that's, anyway, so let's wrap it up. The moral of the story is that if the dinosaurs had have gone extinct at any other time, like when all the continents were together, the mammals we have now wouldn't be nearly as diverse. You would have like, you would have just like elephants and maybe that's it, or you would have ungulates. You'd have deer and camel, and maybe that's it. So anyways, let's talk about, so we're lucky, I think, that we have all these different mammals. Let's talk about the individual mammals and where they come from, because it's interesting, because we have camels that live, like wild camels that live in Africa, but camels are an ungulate, and ungulates come from America. Camels used to live in America. I think they grew up in America, and then they split from horses to camels, and then there were Arctic camels, and then they moved over to Africa and became African camels. And horses are from America, but then they migrated over to the rest of the world and into Africa and turned into zebras. Elephants are originally from Africa, but then they migrated all the way into the Americas before they became extinct, but they're still alive in Southeast Asia. And as far as, that's why Australia, the animals are so different. You have the monotremes and the marsupials. They are, because Australia has been so isolated for so long. And South America was isolated for a really long time until it connected with North America, and that's where the llamas and alpacas came from. Llamas and alpacas are camels. So they originated from North America, and then they came into South America. But they're animals that live in North America that are originally from South America, like the armadillo. So that is basically the evolution of mammals, and that explains why mammals are kind of docile and easy for us to work with, because we've been working with them for so long. But we didn't start drinking cow's milk until about 4000 BC. They found that out from a haplogroup DNA testing. Humans suddenly developed a mutation to be able to drink milk instead of get milk poisoning and not be able to digest it and just get diarrhea and sick and die. And so the people with the ability to drink milk became basically like superhumans. They had much more energy, and they just wiped out all the people who couldn't. And then they had babies, and then next thing you know, everybody is lactose tolerant. We can drink milk. Since humans are mammals, let's just do a really quick explanation of like humans also. Humans, Homo sapiens did live alongside Neanderthals until about 35,000 years ago. The Neanderthals finally went extinct in southern Spain. They went extinct in the island of Gibraltar. They were living in these little caves. And the reason that Neanderthals went extinct was because they got wiped out by Homo sapiens. Homo sapiens and Neanderthal lifestyle was not coexistent. And because Neanderthals hunted animals like animals hunt animals, like the Neanderthal, both male and female, would jump on the backs of these big mastodons and stuff, and kill them with their own hands. But the Homo sapiens were a lot more sophisticated. We used slingshots and bows and arrows, and so when we saw a Neanderthal, living like a human, we didn't have respect for them, and they would cause problems for us because they could beat us one on one, and so we kind of, it was a war, a slow war, and then we wiped them out because we weren't coexistent. There's another human called Denisovan, which is from like West Asia and Southeast Asia and the mountains, and I've already done videos about giants, but I do think that there were giant humans. There are also little munchkin humans on the island of Flores and Indonesia, and also like 4,000 years ago, everybody in Europe, they had dark skin, like England and France and stuff. But then 4,000 years ago, because of the domestication of the cow and the horse and lactose tolerance, the original white people, who we are, migrated into Europe and wiped them completely out. And so that's why we have white skin in Europe now. The white people originally come from northern Eurasia, and they used to have blue eyes though, in Europe, and our white ancestors were more brown-eyed. But anyways, that is the story of the mammals.